today's Top Boxing News.
Okay, we'll start with this. Continued speculation about Top Rank's departure from ESPN. Does Top Rank placing prospects on a club show indicate broadcast deal lapse? Top Rank's final fight of an 8-year broadcasting deal with ESPN arrives July 26 when the company's homegrown product, Xander Zayas, fighting for the vacant WBO junior middleweight title against Jorge Garcia Perez at the Madison Square Garden Theater, while Top Rank officials have maintained with confidence that a new broadcast streaming deal will come together afterward. Top Rank fighters are being assigned bouts on other promotions in the interim, indicating that the expectation of what one industry official labeled as an uncertain lapse in the transition. Top Rank confirmed Wednesday that unbeaten prospects Albert Chop Chop Gonzalez, Art Barrera Jr., and Perla Bezaldua have been assigned to an August 2nd House of Pain promoted card in Saboba Casino in San Jacinto, California. Now, this is what you started to see the PBC do right around the time the Showtime deal was set to expire. More and more you started to see them outsourcing fighters you would normally see on their shows, and they're still doing that now. Look at David Morrell. He's boxing on the next Ring Magazine card. It would appear that Top Rank is doing the same thing, but to a lesser extent. Top Rank's 60 years in business have enabled the company to build a web of connections with fellow promoters that allow for the steady placement of even champions to remain active. Unbeaten welterweight champion Brian Norman Jr. defends his belt on a card in Japan. Yeah, we talked about that, the Jin Sasaki fight. Oshaki Foster will be boxing on a PBC show against Stephen Fulton, the undercard of Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach 2. The August 2nd placements of Gonzalez, Barrera, and Bezaldua on a club show removes 3 prospects who would typically be showcased on ESPN undercards, depriving them of valuable promotion aimed at hardcore fight fans, while Top Rank chairman Bob Arum has mentioned a plan to place fights with as many as 3 broadcasters, streaming partners. Company officials reached by Boxing Scene declined to state when Top Rank's new broadcast deal will begin. An industry expert who's discussed the matter with several parties said Wednesday that the expectation continues to be that Top Rank and Warner Brothers Discovery will strike a deal to place fights on Turner Sports, even though the Turner investment is not expected to exceed the yearly value of ESPN's expiring deal. The expert said there's speculation Top Rank's new deal might not launch until the fall, when NHL and college football games can be leaned upon to advertise the new boxing coverage. Well, that would explain why they've outsourced their prospects, outsourced their fighters. Preliminary rumors seem to indicate that Top Rank is not expected to put on any shows in the month of August. The timetable for their return is unknown. The last Top Rank show on ESPN is July 26. So you see how it all kind of comes together. It's sort of crazy that Top Rank would not engage with DAZN, which offers Matchroom, Queensberry, and Golden Boy fights, the expert said, speculating that Top Rank wants to keep control over talent and production. DAZN could have all the boxing in a few years if it really pushed. The uncertainty occurs in a climate of flux, with Major League Baseball, F1, and UFC also parting with ESPN, while the FCC has approved and is reviewing media industry mergers and splits. Amid all of that, Top Rank is working on patching together its new broadcast deal. Goes back to what I told you. ESPN has fallen on hard times as a byproduct of Americans cutting the cord and moving away from conventional cable packages, which ESPN got a piece of, which helped to fortify their budget that they used to acquire certain content, certain sports rights. But now, with so many Americans moving away from conventional cable packages in favor of streaming, it's their budget that's taken the hit, and as a result, they're losing a lot of the stuff that they used to show. Major League Baseball, F1 racing, and UFC. But boxing, I've long maintained that I was not convinced that ESPN would walk away from boxing, because if you're losing all that other stuff, what are you going to show? You can take the money that you would have spent on all of that other stuff and focus on your boxing. Whether that leaves Top Rank to more heavily lean on its connections during the next few months to lend talent to shows promoted by Japan's Taken, Mexico's Zenfer, or other promotions is unclear for now. One company official referred to the prospect's placement on the House of Pain card as an irrelevant piece. That has prompted a lot of chatter, but nothing substantive about what company negotiators have learned about the process that has to factor in fiscal year spending and improvised plans to keep the top-ranked fighters busy while bridging the company to the finish line of a new TV agreement. Many steps have to be taken. The negotiation is a delicate thing, one industry official said. In layman's terms, people are reading too much into those prospects fighting on that show. They're just keeping them busy wherever they can while they negotiate a new broadcast deal or new broadcast deals. That's all that is. They're honoring their contracts, using their connections to make sure their fighters can make money. Don't read too much into it because that's all it is. A boxing insider, Rick Glacier, provided an update of his own that reads, Top Rank still has no media rights deal in place to replace ESPN when Top Rank ESPN deal effectively ends with a July 26th show featuring Xander Zayas. Top Rank executives are scrambling as potential layoffs loom large if Top Rank cannot secure a top-level TV and or streaming deal. Veteran boxing scribe Abraham Gonzalez said, although this is probably true, I wonder if they have one pending but can't sign and or announce it until after the ESPN deal is officially done. Contracts with non-competes are a thing. I wouldn't write off an OG like Aram. Guys like Aram, Heyman, even King to a degree. Find a way. What's a non-compete? A non-compete, also known as a covenant to not compete, is a contractual agreement that prevents an employee or contractor from working for a competitor or starting a competing business for a set time in a specific area of their employment. In layman's terms, the deal is still active until July 26th. The deal with ESPN. They have to wait until that deal is over before they can sign anything, before they can announce anything. So that could be why it's up in the air and we don't know anything yet. Another veteran boxing scribe in Daisuke Sugiura responded to Abraham Gonzalez by saying, I just talked to Aram in Japan about their broadcast situation.
Obviously, Netflix is the biggest, but there are other streaming services that are looking to make a deal with us, and also one big network that wants to make a deal. And once we put it together, within the next 2 weeks, we'll have a big announcement.
Talking to Aram, it differs from the doom and gloom that you're getting from boxing insider Rick Glacier, who tells a story where the people at Top Rank are scrambling and they don't know what to do. He said at least one big network wants to make a deal. I'd wager that big network is Warner Brothers Discovery. While Rick Glacier says that he's being told by a quality source, Top Rank executives are now formulating a plan to start their own boxing streaming platform, a move not by choice, but Top Rank being forced to resort to creating their own platform because no media outlet is interested in a deal with Top Rank at the kind of rights fee that Top Rank has been demanding. The Top Rank business footprint will considerably shrink. Listen, Rick Glacier was right about the PBC, so could he be right about Top Rank? Imagine how unhappy ESPN and Disney must be with Top Rank after 8 years and approximately $700 million paid out in rights fees by ESPN Disney to Top Rank. Top Rank never even developed one pay-per-view boxing star that ESPN could hang their hat on. Not even one! That in itself is a failure. Well, to be fair, nobody did, Rick. I mean, Golden Boy Promotions didn't develop a bona fide pay-per-view star, and don't say Ryan. The only pay-per-view Ryan was in that did any real numbers was the one where he lost with Javante. Now he just lost to Rolly. Ryan may have been on pay-per-view once or twice, but he is not a pay-per-view star. Could say something similar about Javante Davis, who's been on pay-per-view approximately 7 or 8 times, but he only did real numbers on pay-per-view once. just once, and that was 2 years ago. The rest of the time, his numbers are abysmal.
I mean, it wasn't enough to keep Showtime in boxing, right, Rick? So how do you chastise Top Rank?
How do you criticize them for not developing a bona fide pay-per-view star in the star sense of the word when, in the last few years, nobody really did?
Not in America. In the UK, that's a different kettle of fish, but here...
I've noticed that as Rick Glacier has done more and more business with Golden Boy Promotions and grown closer to that outfit, he's become a lot more critical of this one, where he used to sing their praises. Now, it could just be him calling it down the middle and citing their ineptitude. But we don't know that that's the case, and when you say that they didn't produce a single pay-per-view star, arguably, nobody did in the last 8 years.
Arguably.
The only guy in the last 8 years that passes for a bona fide pay-per-view attraction was, and still is, Canelo Alvarez. This is the only guy that does real numbers, and Golden Boy screwed the pooch with him, but you don't hear Rick talk about that.
No, because then he'd have to be critical of Golden Boy.
How did you mess that up, Oscar? Back over to Top Rank. I tend to lean towards Abraham Gonzalez's school of thought. After 6 decades in the sport of boxing,
Surviving, thriving throughout so many eras and so many changes to the landscape. An OG like Bob Arum, you can't really count him out. That Top Rank might just land on their feet, and people are getting ahead of themselves.
and according to Bob, they may have upwards of 3 broadcast partners moving forward, and more dates than they did before. A very big one in Warner Brothers Discovery, if the rumors check out.
The bottom line is, I wouldn't speak too soon.
About Top Rank's demise or ESPN's departure from the sport of boxing, rumors abound. While Top Rank's last show on ESPN is set for July 26th, it looks like the network isn't quite done with broadcasting boxing. ESPN has had preliminary discussions about the possibility of bringing Al Heyman's PBC to the network.
Do you remember that I told you this a little over a week ago? That behind the scenes, there's a rumor that Top Rank, PBC, and Golden Boy could all end up on ESPN via some financier with a lot of money that wants to rival DAZN and Turkey El Sheikh. Now, it's just a rumor, and it should be treated as such. But about a week and a half later, you see what people are talking about, that PBC may end up going to ESPN.
You heard it here first, if you caught that live stream.
Fishing out this rumor, of which we don't have any details, it indicates to me what I thought, that with ESPN losing MLB and F1 racing and the UFC, they need something to show their viewers.
Now, what it costs to stage a boxing match or boxing matches is comparatively cheaper than the rights to those different sports. And with an amended deal and a different structure, ESPN could very well stay in boxing, just without the commitment.
Like what Sky Sports is talking about doing. They don't want to be joined at the hip to one promoter anymore. They want more wiggle room to bid on individual shows that they think are worth something. So maybe ESPN is of a similar mindset.
I mean, that's part of the rumor that I heard, that they'd be working with anyone from Top Rank to PBC and Golden Boy down the line.
So I wouldn't rush to assumption. This is a story that only time can tell, and time will tell whether or not ESPN leaves boxing, whether or not Top Rank will land on their feet, and what other surprises we might be in store for.
Men's cruiserweight news. The continued fallout and queries in reference to David Benavidez's expressed desire to supposedly face Jai Opetaia. Adrian Rain, friend of the channel, said, if David Benavidez fights Jai Opetaia next, would that be more dangerous than the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol? David would be moving up 26 pounds to fight one of the greatest threats in that division. What do you think?
Well, we've broached this subject already, but from the angle of whether or not this fight is realistic, do we expect it to happen? Addressing the question, is facing Jai Opetaia more dangerous than facing the winner of that fight? I would say that depends on who the winner is. If the winner is Dimitri,
While I'm convinced that Dimitri would take David to school the same way he took Zerto Ramirez to school in the same fashion, I don't think Dmitry knocks him out, but I do think he schools him, whereas Artur, if by some chance Artur wins the trilogy, and he were to, hypothetically, face David right after that, oh yeah, that's dangerous, that's bad. Dmitry would box him up, whereas Artur would bang him out. He'd put him through the ring, oh yeah. He'd stop David, he'd put a beating on him, and he'd stop him. David doesn't have the boxing acumen, the defense, or the power to keep Artur Beterbiev off of him. These two guys would meet each other in the middle of the ring, and it'd be a gunfight. And Artur so obviously has the bigger guns, even though he's up there in age. Power is the last thing to go, and his power hasn't gone anywhere.
Artur is a better version of the fighter David tries to be, because they're both pressure guys, but Artur's got a better amateur pedigree and better boxing acumen. And against a guy who he doesn't have to chase, a guy who's gonna try to walk him down, David would get a rude awakening.
He would do to David what he did to Joe Smith Jr. Now, is that fight comparatively more or less dangerous than a Jai Opetaia fight? I would say the threat level between Artur and Jai is about the same for David, because Jai's gonna brutalize him too.
Jai, a mid-range to inside fighter who's light on his feet. We know he can punch.
And we know he can take one. He fought with a broken jaw against Benavidez. Benavidez, who is a comparatively bigger puncher than David Benavidez. So if Jai Opetaia could take his punches, I think he would take David's punches just fine. But the same cannot be said in reverse. You're talking about a situation where a physical fighter's physical advantages are being stripped away, because you're not fighting little guys at 168 anymore, and you're not fighting old men.
Rank amateurs at 175. Now you're fighting a guy who's all in his prime, like you're supposed to be, but you don't have a size advantage over him, a power advantage over him.
David is not a cerebral fighter. At his very best, he's a physical fighter, a pressure fighter. And if you try to put pressure on Jai, he's gonna walk you into a shot so hard, your ancestors will feel it. So assessing the threat level of these fighters, I'd say the biggest threats to David Benavidez would have to be Jai Opetaia and Artur Beterbiev jointly.
Dmitry Bivol would beat him. He's a threat to his unbeaten record, but those two guys are a threat to not only his unbeaten record, but his health and his longevity. Those two guys would knock years off of David's career.
I don't often spend time breaking down fights like these because I don't expect any of them to happen, though simultaneously, I think all three of those guys would beat David.
Answering the question, it's just the question of who beats him worse.